Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the evening sessions. We are on day 11 of the VID21 conference already. I hope you had a wonderful weekend. If this is your first session to VID21, welcome. If you are returning, welcome back. It's always great to see familiar names appearing in the waiting rooms, so thanks for coming back. We are joined this evening by the wonderful Chris Desmond, who's over in Wellington, New Zealand. Chris is known for many things, but right now we're going to talk about making friends with the uncomfortable.
Awesome. Thank you, Julia. Basically, I'm just a dude who's got a fascination with getting better at dealing with discomfort so that I can get better at doing the hard stuff that makes life exciting. From that fascination, there's probably a couple of things that have come out of it. One is a couple of podcasts that I host, one called the Uncomfortable is Okay podcast and the other one called the Leading Through Challenge Show. And combined, they've got about 300 episodes of interviews and science and stories and strategies of people tackling challenges and all the practical steps that they go through doing that. So that really informs my thinking in this space. And so does my work as a physiotherapist as well, where I get to hang out and help probably thousands of people at the moment through health challenges over the last decade and a half, getting back to optimal function. And one of the things that really excites me as well is I get to work with individuals and teams who are tackling challenges and looking to create something exciting. So that's kind of where my thinking sits around this. And just apologies if you do hear any screaming in the background. Tonight, it's currently bedtime here in my household. So it'll either be my toddler Connor, my baby Jasper, or my wife Julia. I've managed to skive out of that tonight. And we'll see how uncomfortable I am afterwards to be here with you guys. So tonight what we're going to do is we're going to have a chat about discomfort, what's some good discomfort, what's some bad discomfort, and talk around how discomfort affects our ability to perform on a day-to-day basis or perform when we're taking on challenges. And then we'll get to doing a little bit of work. So we'll use a tool to check in with how uncomfortable we are. And once we start to develop a little bit of awareness around that discomfort, then we'll try and get into a couple of practical tools that we can use to manipulate how uncomfortable we are, if we need to pull it back down a little bit, or actually if we need to ratchet it up so we want to perform a little bit better. And what I'm going to do to start with, I'm going to just create a little bit of an awkward pause as I throw up a quote for you. So I just want to drop this with you guys just to have a little bit of a ponder as we talk over the next stuff. And I know, Julia, you said don't talk too much about last year, but I'm just going to give it a quick little nod because last year was super uncomfortable for the majority of people. Pretty much everyone that I talked to found that last year was at least moderately uncomfortable. And I'm sure there are some people out there that didn't find it that uncomfortable. Maybe kind of the guys at Zoom, actually, who we're lovingly using tonight. They had a great year. So did the hand sanitizer people and for some reason the toilet paper companies as well. But the majority of people last year was pretty rough. And actually, kind of coming off the back of that as well, 2021 has been a little bit uncomfortable too, at least for me, and we're not even 3 months in. So our oldest son, Connor, he started a new daycare, and that's kind of uncomfortable letting him go out and try and figure out this new space while you want to protect him, but you want him to learn all these new skills as well, and just kind of wrestling with that. I've had to have some conversations with people in regards to constructive feedback, both on the receiving end and the giving end, which is always uncomfortable. And last month, I ended up quitting my day job as well, which is involved like 2 months of ridiculously uncomfortable internal conversations with myself. So yeah, 2021's been uncomfortable for me as well. I'm just interested in everyone else. Have you guys found 2021 a little bit uncomfortable so far? Julie, are you saying uncomfortable but for a different reason? Do you wanna just expand on that a little bit?
I was more in relation to your comments on Zoom and the toilet paper and the hand sanitizer.
Yeah.
Guys, is that if you speak to some of them, they're actually uncomfortable for the amount of work that they've got to do and how frantic and stressed it was. So even though they probably had a different experience to most, it was still uncomfortable, but for different reasons. I would say my 2021 uncomfortable is probably, it's lower than it was last year, but the uncomfortable is actually more about what next. Getting up and making lunch boxes every morning feels uncomfortable when you've been around in Ugg boots and tracky bottoms for 6 months.
Oh, are you not in Ugg boots and tracky bottoms at the moment?
No, well, I upgraded to jeans and trainers.
It's like, so. Nice. That's the beauty of Zoom, actually. Like, I'm just shorts and bare feet at the moment, and the shorts have like tomato stains on them because it was dinner time just before. Awesome that 2021 is feeling magic for you so far as well. That's very cool. Potentially there's going to be a little bit of discomfort coming along. But if I think about it as well, it's not just 2020 and 2021 that were uncomfortable as well. Like, uncomfortable things happen all the time. So for me, there's been starting new jobs, quitting old jobs, breaking bones, getting them fixed, going traveling and not being able to hablo español, or wakarimasen Japanese as well. It's probably a story for another time, that Japanese restaurant that I ended up in, that no one could speak English and I could speak no Japanese. There's buying houses, there's asking people to marry you, asking person to marry you. Thankfully, she said yes. There's trying to have kids, there's trying to figure out how to raise kids, there's being a dick, there's doing the same dick thing again, there's trying to apologize for it. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. I'm not sure where the congratulations popped out. Hopefully it wasn't just after the being a dick. Oh, Julia, my deck. We need to spray it for mold, eh? It's horrendous. We're thinking about selling the house, so it needs a good spray. So lots of uncomfortable things. Like, uncomfortable things are happening all the time for us. It's discomfort after discomfort after discomfort. But being uncomfortable, despite what the market is, who are trying to sell you air-conditioned lifestyles and send you Uber Eats and just Netflix and chill, would like you to have you believe that actually the optimal state of human being is to live in comfortable opulence. I don't reckon it is, because there's a lot of awesome stuff that's wrapped up in discomfort as well. So most of the things that I was talking about have at least a nugget of awesomeness in them. Some of them quite a big nugget, and some of the nuggets are actually getting bigger in the terms of my children as well. They seem to be growing day by day. But, sorry. But I think instead of running away from discomfort, what we want to be doing is we want to be making friends with it. We want to be learning how to try and dance with the discomfort and embrace it as it comes at us, so that we can step into it and uncover those nuggets of awesomeness within the discomfort. Because you can run away from being uncomfortable. And I've definitely run away from being uncomfortable before. I've run away from conversations. I've run away from hard things that I've needed to do. I've gone out and got drunk, so I got to avoid things. I've turned on Netflix. I've ordered Uber Eats. I've run away from discomfort actively. But the problem becomes that if you continually run away from discomfort, firstly, you never get to experience any of the awesome stuff that's wrapped up in discomfort. And secondly, if all you do is run away from discomfort, discomfort has a nasty habit of catching up with you when you least expect it. And if you're continually running away and it finally does catch up with you, then you don't actually have the skill set to deal with it. And all of a sudden, it's like a wave that comes over and lands on top of you and just squashes you flat and decimates what you've got going on. Or maybe not quite to that extent, but you get the picture. If it catches up with you, you're a bit stuffed. So there's a couple of different types, and sorry, that was a slightly dramatic pause for you guys there. So there's a couple of different ways that you can think about discomfort, and one of the ways that I think about it is there's big discomfort. Sorry, I've just seen a comment by Pip. I reckon it is the same in regards to stress, Pip. I think we could probably use stress and discomfort a little bit interchangeably. We'll talk a little bit more around that later as well. But yeah, stress very similar to discomfort. But there's some big, awesome, uncomfortable things that happen, like getting married, like changing careers, like having kids, like starting a business, running an ultra marathon, getting up and giving a speech. Big uncomfortable things with a bit of awesomeness in them. There are some big uncomfortable things that are less awesome, like natural disasters or global pandemics or loss of a loved one, breaking a limb. But there's also a lot of little small uncomfortable things that happen as well. And often these little small uncomfortable things that are going on don't have that much awesomeness wrapped up in them. So they're the things like time pressure between meetings. There are things like having your schedule being a little bit too full. There are things like being on the phone when you should be with loved ones. Things like not quite getting enough sleep. And the good thing often about these big uncomfortable things that are quite awesome is we get an element of choice for a lot of them. There's a whole lot of things that we don't get to choose, like global pandemics and loved ones dying. But for a lot of the big stuff, we get to play a part in choosing that discomfort and shaping it. And we also get to play a little bit of a part in the little discomforts that we face as well. Sometimes not so much, but we get to choose how much time we book between meetings, sometimes, unless our boss is a dick as well. We also get to choose if we're on the phone in front of our family or in front of our loved ones. And often what I find for myself and for some of the people that I work with is those little discomforts add up and they get in the way of us taking on the big discomforts, those big, awesome, uncomfortable things that we want to do, because we've got so much little discomfort that's stacked up in our system. We don't feel that we have the capacity to jump out and tackle a big discomfort. And as I said, we don't always get to choose the big discomforts that we get. Sometimes they're forced upon us. And if we have a whole lot of these little discomforts going on, then it's much harder to adapt when this big discomfort happens. So my wife and I obviously chose to have children. That was our choice, uncomfortable as it continues to be. But one of the things that we didn't get to choose was the fact that our kids showed up early. Connor, our oldest, showed up at about 26 and a half weeks gestation. So he was 3 months early. And his younger brother, Jasper, showed up at just under 32 weeks. So he was 2 months early. And all up together with the boys, we spent 141 days, I think, in the neonatal intensive care unit here in Wellington, which is an awesome place. And if you're going to have premature babies, it's a great place to have them. But that was by far the most uncomfortable thing that I've ever had to go through. And probably if I get to the end of my life and look back, I'd say it's going to be up there in terms of the most uncomfortable things that I've had to go through for hopefully the next sort of 60 or 70 years that I get to live. And that discomfort happened not because I got to choose it, but it just arrived. And unfortunately for me, I had a whole lot of those little uncomfortable things that had built up in my life before that. And then this big uncomfortable thing just kind of exploded on top of it. And that really started me thinking about, okay, how do I get better at managing discomfort? How do I get better at managing stress, Pip? How do I get better at managing how I'm rolling in life in general? And even though they showed up early and it was a discomfort that was kind of forced upon us, it still had an element of awesome to it as well, is that I've got to spend longer with my kids than I otherwise would have. So I got to spend an extra 141 days longer, which is fantastic. But I also got to create a little bit of gratitude for where I live here in New Zealand, the amazing staff at Wellington Hospital, but also some more gratitude for my kids, because every parent thinks their kids are special, I know, and I think my kids are special as well, but I also get to have a little bit of a think about how easily they might not be here as well, because in some countries, some first world countries, which will remain nameless, they don't resuscitate kids that were born at Connor's gestation, which I look at him now and I look at the almost 3-year-old he is, and that just blows my mind, to think that this little ball of energy wouldn't be here if I lived in another country. So discomfort's going to catch up with you, and it's going to layer on top of itself as well. And through that period of time, I managed to get rid of a whole lot of little discomforts that otherwise would have dragged me down so that I could deal with this big one. And sorry, this is just a bit of a pivot pause, this one, rather than a dramatic pause. As I said, we have all of these little discomforts that often get in the way of us tackling the big discomfort. And one of the ladies that I was working with wanted to write a book, and she obviously had this big uncomfortable thing that she wanted to do in terms of the book that she wanted to get out. It had been it was based off her experience the past a few years going through an abusive relationship. And it was in there, and she'd had to work through all of this, and she wanted to get it out and share some of the tools that she had learned. But one of the things that she found was it was all those little uncomfortable things that were getting in her way of doing this big uncomfortable thing. So it was the fact that she was a notorious overcommitter. She said yes to everything, and filled up her diary without spending any time writing. She was a little bit of a perfectionist as well. So she felt uncomfortable moving on before something was perfect. So she spent all of this time working on editing the part that she had already written rather than writing anything new. And a whole lot of other little uncomfortable things that got in the way of her doing this really big uncomfortable thing. And we obviously did a little bit of work together and we made some progress. And she got to the point where she was talking to a publisher who asked her the question, who's your writing coach? And I really enjoyed her response because I think it sums up discomfort quite well. She said, oh, I don't have a writing coach. I've just got a guy that helps me get all the uncomfortable bullshit out of the way so I can write. And I think that's one of the things that we need to be working on when we think about discomfort is getting the uncomfortable bullshit out of the way so we can become friends with those big, awesome, uncomfortable things. I want to just ask you a question for a minute so that you can stop and have a think. What big, awesome, uncomfortable thing do you want to be working on this year? Feel free to write your answers in the chat, or if you're brave enough and want to get uncomfortable enough, feel free to unmute yourself and yell it out.
I was made redundant last year, so this year is my year of actually committing to working out what I want to be doing in this chapter of my life.
That's awesome, Sarah. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Awesome. The portfolio career idea, Pip. Great.
Yeah, we had a great session on that this afternoon.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go back and watch that one. That I was like, oh, I need to see that. But both my kids were all over the place. Cool. So big uncomfortable things. What little uncomfortable things are getting in your way at the moment?
School lunch boxes.
Yeah.
Juggling budget while trying to study and work out what I'm doing with my life.
Yeah. Yeah. Unpredictable parenting demands. And I mean, a lot of the stuff they're not in this like scheme of your life. They're little uncomfortable things. When you're in the moment, then often don't seem that little, which is really challenging. I want to have a little bit of a talk, and again, kind of pivot pause here for a second. Yeah, certainty and uncertainty at the same time, Julia. That's, yeah, trying to kind of hold that in your head is quite uncomfortable as well. But I want to talk a little bit about the role discomfort plays and how we show up in the world and how we're performing. And I quite like simplified versions of big concepts. Oh, I've just lost you all. Simplified versions of big concepts, and in terms of kind of how we deal with discomfort and how we deal with stress and how that affects us on a day-to-day basis. And I think kind of the best thing that I've found to try and explain that, I'm going to share my screen again, is a couple of dudes back in 1908. Why is that not going? There we go. A couple of dudes back in 1908 named Yerkes and Dodson first mapped out this relationship of how we perform under pressure, or how we perform under load or under discomfort or under stress. Back in 1908, they used the word arousal, which in 2021 may not translate quite that well unless you're a clinical psychologist or involved in a different type of industry. So with my physio brain on, I've used the word load here. If we look at the y-axis, so that's a performance. So basically we can think about that as our ability to reach our potential in a certain task or a certain group of tasks. So how well we can throw a ball, how well we can parent, how well we can solve this maths equation given a certain point in time. And the bottom axis, the x-axis, is load or pressure or stress or discomfort. So that's the cumulative effect of all of the pressures that we're under in our lives. So they are the big pressures that we have from children and other things, but they're also the small pressures that our schedules are really, really full and we don't have time for ourselves, that it's hard to get out and exercise, that it's 8 p.m. and you think, oh my God, I've only drunk 2 glasses of water today. Or you get to 3 o'clock and think, oh, I haven't had lunch yet. Or potentially it's that awkward conversation that you've had with your boss that carries over to when you get home and you make some unfortunate snarky remark to your significant other and get in trouble with it because those little layers of stress have added up. And I'll talk a little bit about the science behind it in a minute. And you can feel free to zone out for that as well if you're not into that kind of stuff. But I think the important thing is that a bit of pressure is good for us. So a little bit of stress is quite good. If we're just sitting on the couch completely relaxed, like we're down at 0, then we're not going to perform particularly well. If we add a little bit of pressure, if we add a little bit of stress, we start to perform better because, for a bunch of reasons, but we focus on the task at hand, our skills are a little bit more challenged, and we start to become a little bit more interested. And pressure is good up until that point, up until the top part of the graph. So that's really the point of optimal anxiety, you might want to call it. Because if we keep loading ourselves up and we keep putting more pressure on ourselves or more discomfort on ourselves, then we're going to start to slide down the other side of the curve. We're going to start to slide down into overwhelm. We're going to start to slide into burnout. And again, to kind of think about it, I think about it because I'm a physio of how muscles work. So if I'm just sitting here, moving my arm around, my muscles are contracting, but there's not much load on them, so they don't contract particularly well. If I add a little bit of weight, then they start to contract a little bit better. They're a bit more effective. I have to control things a little bit more. So I'm starting to perform better. But if I add a whole lot of weight, then actually what happens is my muscles start to lose the ability to contract. And if I keep adding weight, then sooner or later, either I can't pick up the weight or I pick it up and then I drop it on top of me and it crushes me. So it's ideally what we want to be doing is we want to be living over on that left side of the curve, moving up into the performance zone and coming back down out of it on a if life was ideal. But as we know, life is not particularly ideal. And often the way that we live our lives, especially with all of these little uncomfortable stresses, is we have a small stress on a small stress on a small stress. It starts to track us over to the right. already. And what's actually happening there is our body has a threat response. So every time we have some discomfort or we come under some stress, certain reactions happen in our body. Our sympathetic nervous system fires up and causes our breathing to get a little bit faster, changes the focus of our eyes, tenses our muscles. It's a fight or flight response. Our endocrine system actually kicks into gear as well, and we get a whole lot of different hormones starting to circulate in the bloodstream. And these are kind of the big system things, but also down at a cellular level, we're starting to experience different chemical reactions and different electrical reactions as well as a result of this threat response, which again is cool if all we're experiencing is those big uncomfortable things, that then there's a period of time where things settle back down and our body processes these threat responses, and then we can start again. But the way that we live our lives at the moment, often these little things are layered on top of each other. Kids screaming, meeting with bosses, busy schedule, worries about bills, assignments due. These little things layer on top of each other and often don't let us fully recover once the threat response has been kicked off, because it takes a little while for your sympathetic nervous system to calm back down. It takes a little while for the hormones that have been circulating in your bloodstream because of the threat response to be processed through your liver and your kidneys, and then you pee them out. It takes a little while for those chemical reactions in your cells to start to settle down. So what happens is discomfort, discomfort, discomfort. We go further over to the right. And then when we decide, actually, hey, here's this big uncomfortable thing that I want to do, I'm already sitting quite high on that curve. I add a buttload of more discomfort to it, and it pushes me over that right-hand side, sliding me down into overwhelm or maybe towards burnout. And we pull back, we start to run away because we've overwhelmed ourselves, and we run back to all of that little bullshit uncomfortable stuff that we do and think, actually, I can't do that. I can't do that big uncomfortable thing. It's way too uncomfortable for me. Or we persist without trying to rebalance the discomfort, and we slide our way down into burnout and end up at a bit of a tipping point or a crisis. So hopefully you didn't zone out too much. I saw some nods during that as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to throw up the slide again, and I want to ask you guys a question. I want to ask you, where are you sitting today on this curve? What's happening for you? And what might be helpful, some people think about it just as a number. They think, oh, cool, today I'm a 4 or today I'm an 8. Some people think about it as a range that they're sitting in, or for the really intense people, they think about it as kind of proportions that they spend in each range. So I want you to check in with yourselves and just think, okay, where am I today? And if you want to share them in the chat, that would be amazing. Tonight, I'm probably rolling somewhere between, maybe, I was going to be kind to myself and I was going to say a 6, but realistically, I'm probably about a 7.5. So apologies to you guys. And that's off the back of a few things. One, I have a baby who doesn't really love sleeping, which just makes everything harder. Cool, a 4 to 6, nice. So doing pretty well, Julia. Nice work. Cool. Excellent, Pip. Why are you different today? So why is it a 3 or 4 today as opposed to a 7 or an 8 usually? Yeah, the juggle. I wrote a blog post once, I think it was in lockdown, the juggle is real. And it's ridiculous, sometimes juggling where we're at. But I use this tool. I use this curve and the 0 to 10 rating to kind of have a check-in with me every day, with myself every day, just to figure out, okay, where am I today? And am I continually rocking that sort of 8 or 9, or haven't hit a 10 yet, thankfully, but am I rocking that 7 or 8 or 9 for too many days in a row? Or am I heading in the wrong direction and sliding down into overwhelm and burnout? And if I see that, then I know what I need to do. Is I know that I need to change what I'm doing somehow, because there are a lot of things that we can't change with discomfort. We can't change global pandemics. We can't change kids showing up early. Yeah, and Elizabeth, the question, it's super normal that it fluctuates every few weeks. Things change in your lives, and how you react to them changes based on a multitude of factors. So hormones. Thankfully, I'm a dude, so I don't really have to worry about that too much. But for me, like things like how well I'm sleeping, it's been what I've been eating, it's how much I've exercised. If I haven't exercised for a few days in a row, I've never heard of that one, so I've never heard of that one. I get ridiculously sick, like when I get a virus though, because they all attack the Y chromosome. So I have that much harder. But if I don't exercise for a couple of days in a row, I'm just a horrible person. I'm a much worse person, at least. Cool. But the cool thing is that we can really manipulate where we sit on this curve to some degree. And there are probably 3 different things that we need to be thinking about to either shift ourselves up the curve so that we generate a bit more discomfort so we perform better, or bring ourselves back down the curve, as I find myself mostly needs to do. And those things are actions. So the things that we do or the things that we don't do obviously have an effect of where we sit on the curve. There are systems. So these are the things that, how our life is set up. It's the environment that we operate in. It's the processes that we follow. And they add stress or they can take away stress. And the third thing is stories. So stories are what we tell ourselves about what's going on. It's the perspectives that we take about what's happened or what we think might be happening in the future. So it's what we do or don't do. It's how we set up our lives. And it's the stories that we tell ourselves about it. And actions are often reasonably simple to think about. Do or don't do them. Stories as well, much harder to change, but easy to think about. Okay, it's that little voice in my head that's telling me what's going on. Systems are maybe sometimes a little bit difficult to grapple with. They're things I find for me. Again, I'm gonna just share my screen with you, and show you a couple of examples. Cool. So here's an example for me of how this action system stories works. I need to work out or do some type of exercise 3 or 4 times a week. And it's challenging with kids, and my wife has just gone back to work part-time as well, so it makes it harder. But the action that I need to take to do this uncomfortable thing is to go to the gym 3 times a week. The systems that I set up for myself, make sure I go to the gym before the kids get up, set my alarm early the night before, and get everything ready to go. And the story that I tell myself is I need to flip. I don't have time to exercise, to I feel much better and operate much better when I exercise. And another one, presenting at VID19 is slightly uncomfortable for me. Thank you, Julia, for the opportunity. But the action that I needed to take with this to do this big, awesome, uncomfortable thing was to stick up my hand to present at VID21. I called it VID19 before. That's uncomfortable. But the systems that I needed to put in place to do this were to map my thinking and my processes about how I go through dealing with discomfort. It's practicing a presentation while jiggling a baby to sleep. He never got through a full presentation. And also to communicate with my wife, so I have free space to prepare. So I needed to put those systems in place. And also I needed to flip some stories as well. I needed to flip, you're not very good, you don't really have anything interesting to say, and you take really long dramatic pauses for no apparent reason. So I needed to change that to, actually, this stuff has been super helpful for you. Hopefully it's useful for someone else as well. So with that being said, and now that you have a little bit of an idea about systems, life systems set up to enable you to cope, I love a good system because it should make your life easier. And I want to just finish off with one little exercise for you guys, so that you can start to think about what it is that you are doing to load yourself up or to unload you. So I want you to grab a piece of paper, whatever you got in front of you, pull it up. I want you to draw a line down the middle of it, and I want you to write load on one side, and I want you to write load on the other side. And I want you to spend just 60 seconds now jotting down 2 or 3 things each side of the load and unload column about things that add discomfort to your life at the moment and things that take discomfort away. And if you want to share some of these in the chat box as well, that would be amazing. So as you're writing, things that load me up at the moment are juggling childcare with my wife. We ended up handing a baby over in a parking lot the other week. It was a parking lot where my wife worked, but trying to figure out childcare and not always communicating particularly well around it. That loads me up. What unloads me is having conversations and communicating better. So hopefully you guys have a couple of things written down there at the moment. Yeah, unload, exercise, time to walk around, VID21, time with loved ones, having great conversations. Awesome. So what we want to be doing is we want to be doing more of the things that unload us, ideally, and less of the things that load us up. Or with that load column, what we want to be doing is we want to be trying to manipulate them to take some load off. So take some pressure off. So I want you to, as homework from this, what I want you to think about is I want you to look at especially that load list, and I want you to think, what's the easiest way that I could change this? Could I do something differently? So could I act differently? Could I create a different system for the way that I do this? Or could I tell myself a different story about this to take some load off? And what I'll do is I'll load up these exercises to Julia. I think has swag bags in the VID21 community, so I'll throw it up there. If you want to grab it off me as well, though, you can also I've got it on my website, or one of my websites, uncomfortableisok.com, that you can grab a free copy of it there as well, and it has podcast links too. But I think in summary, we need to make friends with the discomfort. We need to not view discomfort as a bad thing. Oh, thank you, Sarah. Yeah, we need to not view discomfort as a bad thing, and we need to check in with ourselves to see how uncomfortable we are, because if we're too uncomfortable, it can affect how we show up in life. It can affect the way that we do things. And most of the time we can alter that by removing some of that little uncomfortable bullshit, so that we can focus more on the big, awesome, uncomfortable things that we want to be doing with our lives.